Hey guys, welcome back to Muslim Minds. Today we're going to be reacting to the PBD podcast put out by Patrick Ben David. And it's going to be, specifically, this clip is going to be about Muhammad SAW is not a proper role model. And this is from the ex-Muslim guy, Rachid. So let's check it out.
Biggest criticism of, because you were a Muslim before and you converted. What was your biggest reasoning for doing so?
My biggest reasoning, and I want to comment on a point that I forgot to comment last time. Our brother, he said the 5% of Islam we're focusing on.
Right.
If you have this glass of water and you have 95 for it is water, but 5% is poison, it's going to kill you. So this is exactly what we have with Islam. Yes, you can.
We're not calling it poison. That 5%, like what he's probably referring to, because I saw the entire debate. He's probably referring to when Daniel is saying these rules about apostasy laws and things related to that matter.
It's like 5% of Islam is violent or something.
Yeah, and so I think what Daniel's point is that he's trying to establish is that you're trying to portray that this is all Islam is, that there's no other context, no other parameters. It's not. We don't think it's poison. We don't think that 5% is harmful in any way. But there's just other elements of the faith that is being ignored.
And there's so much more that can be said, but just continue on for now.
Talk about God, talk about worshiping, but how about violence against people like me? How about violence against Christians and Jews? You are ordered to wage war against them. That's what happened to my ancestors in Morocco. Berbers, they were Christians. They were executed. They were enslaved. That's what happened to people in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, and even in Europe. How about that? How about people who, for example, against women, Islam against women?
And we should note that they endorsed the death penalty for apostasy.
Well, just to make a note on that point, looking towards the actions of people who are trying to oppress others based off the reasons for religion or whatever other reason, is not always necessarily derived from the religion. These same exact statements about women, the treatment of women, the view of women as if they're devils, right? The treatment of other people who are not Christian, heretics, right? This has all been recorded within the Christian history itself as how they would deal with these type of people in a violent and sometimes very oppressive manner. But I would not go even so far to say as that is representative of Christianity. That's representative of mankind and people who are not perfect, right? The tenets of the faith is one thing, but the taking and abusing of a faith is a completely different thing.
Yeah, and they're talking about something where it comes to like defending yourself when you're being attacked, and you putting it as Muslims should do it 24/7. Then what about the times where the Prophet Muhammad SAW and Muslims, they lived peacefully with every religion and allow them to do what they want? Like, it's not.
Yeah,
they're taking everything out of context.
It's like emotional arguments. He's looking at things he has problems with, and he's associating it with the religion. Every single thing.
Yeah.
Just because someone, like, I can do something right now and claim it's in the name of Islam, but who am I? Why am I credible? Especially according to Islam.
And if it's not even according to Islam.
Exactly, like
the
first three generations
Islam
are the
itself
best.
doesn't agree with it.
Yeah, it's like the first 3 generations are the best Muslims. Afterwards, you're gonna have probably people trying to corrupt or take advantage of the faith, for their own selfish reasons.
Right here.
Yeah.
So
let me just finish.
As does Jesus Christ.
And against women should be beaten if they disobey their husbands. My mom was beaten, my Imam dad. When I asked him why, he said it's in the Quran. You cannot object to that.
Yeah, okay. Well, so again, you can take something and misuse it, misattribute it, right? Islam does not allow beating your wives. I mean, why is it that a lot of non-Muslims, people who have no knowledge of our faith, take ayat from the Quran like this, make their own tafsir, make their own interpretation, and say, this is what you Muslims believe. But then if you ask every credible Islamic scholar, you look at the four madahib, you look at the opinions of the companions and their explanations on some verses that people may not understand. And it is not at all what they have as a misunderstanding. Rather, they look at ignorant laymen who take verses like this and abuse them, and they say this is what Islam is. What? Rather than look at the actual credible sources, people of knowledge, and how they view these kind of verses or view these kind of aspects as well, then that just goes out the window, and what we're focusing on is people abusing things, which is completely incorrect.
Just his personal experience with his dad beating his mom and justifying it. That doesn't mean it's in Islam.
There is no beating of your wife in Islam. What is prescribed in the Quran is a very simple punishment or simple retribution for if you have a wife who is disobeying you. And that's not the first immediate solution. If she's continuously causing issues between you as a spouse, and it gets to the point where that's the only effective thing to do, the extent to which you're allowed to even perform that action is equivalent to me taking a toothbrush and tapping the wrist without leaving any kind of mark. This is the opinion of every Islamic scholar, and even they say that
this is in the hadith too.
Yeah, and they say it's elaborated on hadith, which goes in hand with the Quran. And even what they say about this is that the best men will still not go to that. This is only under extreme levels, right? Because it's the very last thing Allah says to do in the Quran, meaning that it's a very serious matter. Allah is not saying just go ahead and even that's the first thing you do. You try to refrain from speaking to them. You leave them from the bed, kind of give them a bit of a cold shoulder so they can have their heart, show some remorse. And if that doesn't work, then this is something that you're allowed to do. But just by
a symbolic thing, you can't cause any pain. So
exactly, it's going to be more of a sad thing for the wife just out of the symbolism.
They cannot object to it. It's in the Quran. It should be applied. It's a permission for men to beat his wife.
What does he mean it should be applied? So he misbelieves that Quran says to cause pain, and now he wants it to be applied. He just said before. Doesn't make sense.
He's like,
literally.
It's in the Quran. It's the word of Allah himself. Again, when I studied the life of Muhammad, in 10 years, he waged 83 wars. In 10 years. 27 wars and 56 raids in 10 years.
If you're a Christian, Moses, how many wars was he a part of? How many battles was he a part of? How many prophets of the Old Testament? Like, the thing is, if you want, like, what's
the point of if a war happened, what's the point of it?
If we want to attack Islam morally, we want to look at the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and attack him morally, then my simple question is, why are you questioning his morals? Why does that really matter? They'll say, oh, well, how could a prophet of God do X, Y, Z? What about Lot having drunken incest with his daughters? What about Moses getting angry with his army officers saying, why did you spare the women? Any young girl who has not lied with the man, keep for yourself. Again, I'm not dissing Christianity here. I'm just returning the fire of what is so easily done without context, without understanding. I'm sure the Christians right now are like, no, wait, there's context, right? Because that's very important to understand, right? So the Prophet, why did he go to war? Why did he have the Battle of Badr? What was Uhud all about? Oh, well, it's kind of simple. The pagan Quraysh Arabs wanted to wipe him and his people out for simply believing La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. So they were trying to wipe them out on that premise alone. So the rest, what was he doing for those 23 years of prophethood? Defending his livelihood, defending his ummah, defending his nation, right? And then when he went on offensive battles, who is he trying to wage war against? The corrupt Byzantines, they're an oppressive superpower. What's wrong with waging war against them? I don't see anything wrong with that. Especially if you're a prophet of God.
And you are going to teach me that Islam is peaceful? No, it's not peaceful. Are you going to give a Nobel Prize for somebody who waged 83 wars? No, you will not. And another thing, Muhammad is not a role model. Jesus is. Muhammad, he had many wives, 11 of them. One of them, she was 9 years old. He was 53. I am 50. I cannot marry a girl that has 9 years old. You cannot. That's abuse.
Yeah, in today's modern world, especially in the states or countries like the United States, that makes total sense. The maturity level, the life expectancy, how our world operates today is not how it operated 1,400 years ago. The greatest enemies of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, Christian, atheist, Hindu, you name it, pagan, they did not come after him for his marriage with Aisha radiallahu anhuma, because that was not an abnormal thing for all of human history. Now, we can throw all of human history under the bus and call all of them backwards morons, right? But the functionality of marriage is not the same as it was today, as it was that long ago. The purpose is what it would mean for the woman, especially in a society where it's hard for women to survive in a tough Arab environment, right? It's not as easygoing as a first world country like the United States to survive, right? You need to be constantly protected. So its function was different. I mean, this is a non-point.
Back then, it's like once you hit puberty, like physical puberty, mental puberty, that's when you're allowed to get married in Islam.
Yeah.
That's the way it was.
That's just God's
now
stipulation.
It's based on like if you're 18.
It's very
or something.
arbitrary. Japan it's
And,
13,
yeah.
the UK it's 16, the United States it's 18. It used to be 17,
US
16,
was
15.
12 like 100 years
100
ago.
years ago, 12, 13. The thing is, these are arbitrary numbers that function based off your society, and that's fine. If this is what your society requires to have healthy, sustainable marriages, that makes total sense. But it's not across the board, even in the modern sense. With other developed nations like Japan, it's completely different. So are we just going to call them all morons and become like completely ignorant and closed-minded? That's not how it works.
Yeah, for Islam, in those days, it wasn't even based on a number. It was just based on if this person is...
Like biological science that God has instilled. Yeah.
You can't put a number on it.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of Christians like to dispute this point, but Rebecca's marriage, she was 3 years old when she got married, according to the Old Testament. This is by Jewish commentaries. They say, yes, she was 3, because there's not an actual age stipulated in the New Testament or the Old Testament about when to get married.
And Muhammad did that.
Can we do
so many things. Let me finish this. He raided a Jewish tribe. He killed the whole family of a newly bride called Safiya. And he took her as a wife the same time he was returning to Medina. Would you put that as a role model for me today in the 21st century?
There's so many things you're not asking. Why did he go to battle? To whom did he go to battle with? Were they oppressors? If you look at all the history that's recorded about this Jewish tribe that he's talking about, I think he's talking about Khaybar, right? Maybe I'm mistaken, but they were, all 3 of the Jewish tribes that lived in Medina betrayed the Prophet ﷺ in some way. All 3 of them. The Prophet didn't do it. He didn't just wage war against them. They all betrayed. Now, if someone says, oh, that's convenient, what if it's backwards? You cannot read into history your own narrative for something that's not there just to fit your argument. Oh, I want Islam to look bad, therefore the Prophet ﷺ just waged war against them. All the history about what happened to them is lies. But we are recording that we attacked them, right? So it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? We don't leave out any details and try to make it look pretty. There's several hadith and accounts about how those kind of attacks went down, right? But there's a reason behind it.
He had another wife called Rihanna. My daughter, her name is Rihanna. I named her specifically for that. He took a Jewish wife, Rihanna, and he did sex with her. Not with her will. He did against their wills. All these ladies. Are you going to put him as a role model? You cannot compare Jesus with Muhammad. Jesus never killed a person. He never killed an apostate. He never waged a war. So he was a role model for me. That's why I loved Muhammad and I wanted to follow Jesus. They are going to keep trying, bring the Old Testament. Name one person that Jesus killed because he was an apostate. Judas, he gave him to the Jews and he never ordered his disciples to kill him. I have people who just criticized Muhammad once, and he ordered his disciples to go and kill him, even lying. His name is Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. He's a Jewish guy. They killed him. They lied to him. They took him and they killed him. He even encouraged a guy who was blind. He killed his wife. He had 2 kids, and he killed her. He came to the prayer and he said, Muhammad praised the guy for killing his own wife just because she criticized Muhammad. So these are the rules that they want to apply today. If we criticize Muhammad, we should be killed. Like what happened with Charlie Hebdo. Do you think those people, they just killed the people who drew the caricature for Muhammad just because like that? No, because it's written in Islam that they should kill people who criticize Muhammad. So Islam is a big problem. Even the 5% can kill whole humanity.
Can I have a response?
Sure, please go for it, Jake.
And I want to comment on what he said and also Robert's remark about us endorsing the punishment for apostasy. Yes, we do. Why? Because our claim is that we are actually faithful to our scriptures. You guys are not. You want to avoid the Old Testament, and I want to give you an analogy, Patrick, because you're a business guy. You have many businesses, okay? And you have policies that you have to put in place based on social
I would say from a Christian perspective, what is wrong with holding down your faith? You guys have been bullied. Your faith, especially in the Protestant sense, has been warped and contaminated. You see the destruction happening to mankind before your eyes. Aren't you guys not upset? Like, when it comes to, you know, addressing heretics or, you know, heathens or whatever it may be, you know, you believe you're following the religion of God. You believe there's good and evil in the world. Sometimes you got to stand up for what's true, right? So what I don't understand from the Christian, and this is in their history, because the early Christians were not like that. They were brave. They had confidence, and they had principle. They had something in them to stand for their own values, right? But you don't see that anymore. You see people throwing their Old Testament under the bus. Oh, we don't have to do that. It's okay if they mock Jesus. We're so loving. Bro, no, if you believe Jesus is God, why would you allow someone to say something so negative about your God, right? I'm not saying go and chop their head off, but like, why don't you, you know, show some more backbone? Like the Muslims here, they're able to say, no, we're not going to tolerate jokes. If you're going to be an apostate in Islamic jurisprudence, there is a Sharia way that we handle that, right? Because we care about preserving the truth. We care about not letting mankind fall into this degeneracy that you see everywhere across every society. So I'm addressing the Christians here. Like, come on, guys. Like, this is not even about like a Muslim-Christian debate here. You know that this guy, Rachid, is spitting nonsense. And same with his little partner over here.
Yeah, and a lot of stuff he said was mainly just emotional arguments, and he's just bringing up stuff he doesn't like with no context. So you can't really... He brought up like 10 things in like 1 minute. You can't really talk about it at all.
Yeah,
but
yeah, complaining, whining, crying.
Yeah.
Interaction in the workplace and all that kind of stuff. Now, you may make amendments to those policies based on new data, new information, how things are actually going based on those things that you put in place. Now, when you do, right, and this is the analogy between the Old Testament and the New Testament, are you willing to say that, well, yeah, thinking to myself, yeah, Pat, yeah, you were wrong, actually, when you said it was okay to do such and such. That was actually wrong, and you then put in the correct one. With the Bible, the problem that you have is the same one that you want to talk about, the loving Jesus Christ himself, which we also adore and respect as a prophet, is the same one that you believe is God and revealed the Old Testament, and you can't get out of that. So when your God, Jesus, revealed at that specific time, as I just read the passage, and I can read you plenty more where he says to kill babies in war. Is it okay to target infants in war and kill babies? Is that inherently immoral? The problem that you have is if you go on, and this is why the argument is so important. It's not...
For the record, they did not answer this question.
To croquet just as a fallacious argument. It's checking for your consistency as a Christian, whether or not you're actually faithful to your own text and tradition. And the reality is you're not. Why? You have two options. If you condemn it as inherently immoral, then the whole Bible's gone. Because if you believe that those verses in the Bible were revealed by God, then you're saying that God is immoral. And on the other hand, if you say that it's not inherently immoral, but God changed the law at this time.
I like what Jake is doing, because instead of like just addressing all the machine gun bullet points that Crybaby was listing off, he's trying to say, well, why are you speaking so much about morality when you have all these troubling passages in the Old Testament, but you're just throwing it all under the bus for your own, for your own benefit.
He's speaking about one topic and going in depth rather than
he's dissecting
500
it. And he's using that to make a solid point that can address everything.
Then most of your arguments lose the force that they have against Islam, because you can no longer argue that it is inherently immoral to punish an apostate by death and all of the other things that you want to tack on. This is why it's so important. It's not a fallacious argument, and the reality is we want to stick to our text and our tradition, and for the most part, we would argue that the Christians have abandoned them in favor of secular, liberal, moral ideologies.
Let me have Daniel respond, and then I'll come to you. Go for it.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things that we need to respond to, because he's just listing every grievance that he has against Islam. Right. We have to take it step by step. But just on this point of violence, I think Jake makes really the crucial point. It's that Jesus, according to the Christian belief, Jesus is the God of the Old Testament. And he's the one who's commanding Moses, for example, to ethnically cleanse the Canaanites or the Amalekites or all of these other tribes, and to conduct conquest and war, to take girls as slaves, to take virgins as slaves. This is in the Old Testament, sure. So Christians have to deal with that moral problem. A lot of Christians, unfortunately, they just throw the Bible under the bus. And,
That's
you know,
what
how
it
is
is.
that justified? But it's not just the Old Testament. It's also the New Testament. The New Testament also endorses slavery. The New Testament also has the book of Revelation where Jesus is going to come, which, by the way, Muslims also believe that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the born of the Virgin Mary, and he's going to come as the Messiah to establish God's kingdom on earth. Muslims also accept and believe that, and we're anticipating that. But he's going to be...
Consider Jesus to be among the 5 greatest messengers ever sent. So that would be Abraham, Jesus himself, Noah, Moses, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, like when Rashid said he takes Jesus as a role model, so do we.
Yeah.
Every Muslim, if you don't believe in Jesus, you can't be a Muslim.
But the thing is,
So
like you have
also
to
take Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a role model too, the final messenger.
He has a very soft, liberal perspective of what a role model is. Like, you know, Jesus is in his soft mannerisms and his approach to the people and his mercy and his grace, right? But then you have other men who are powerful, like Moses or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is the perfect balance between a warrior and then also a political leader, not a politician, but a political leader, a figurehead, a governmental figurehead, right? And then you have him as even a family man, how his wives spoke about how great his character was, how the people around him, how all his companions spoke about his great character, right? So there are many elements to what makes a great man. What, you know, if you're a warrior, if you're strong, if you're sharp, if you have foresight, if you can establish a government, and, you know, all these kind of things, right? So it's not just like someone who's the most nice and turn the cheek and all that. That's the best person.
Yeah,
That's
to
not how it
be
works.
balanced in all aspects.
Yeah, like, of course, Jesus is, I mean, we're not even equivalent to the dirt underneath his feet, but you cannot say that alone, his qualities of grace and kindness and mercy, is all that a good person can be. There's far more than that.
Yeah.
Be very violent. It's going to be a very violent affair, and that's in
He's gonna
the
come back
Muslim
different.
tradition and the Hadith, and it's also in the Book of Revelation. So Jesus is also very violent. And then finally, you have canon law.
According to Islam, Isa is going to take a spear and ram it through the Antichrist and kill him. So
have the church tradition. So if Robert wants to denounce canon law, because when you have canon law, it has slavery, it has a marriage age of 12 years old in canon law, it has punishments for blasphemy, it has even striking the wife, the disobedient wife. That's found in canon law from Gratian. So I believe that Robert is an Orthodox Christian. If he wants to denounce canon law and denounce his own tradition, he can denounce that. He can denounce Jesus himself. He can denounce the Old Testament. He can denounce the Bible, the New Testament. That's fine. That's fine. He says that, oh, well, our religion adapts. Our religion changes. But that's actually the problem,
Yeah, exactly.
Patrick. You know, when we're talking about wokeism, when we're talking about, like, if you can say that, oh, well, you know, that's the Old Testament is for those times. It's not applicable now. Right? That's the argument. The violence, the killing of blasphemers, that's for old times. We've changed, but Muslims are not willing to change. I say, yeah, Muslims are willing to stand by revelation. The problem with a lot of Christians, not all Christians, a lot of Christians, Jews, Hindus, they all have these practices in their books. Buddhists, they all have these practices, and they're pressured to change and update. And so why, if you can get rid of the conquest and the violence and the punishment for apostasy, why not just get rid of the prohibition of, like, cross-dressing, the prohibition of homosexuality, the prohibition of drag queens? Why prohibit any of that? Like, maybe times are different. Maybe we need to adopt drag queen story hour in our church. Maybe we need to adopt, all of these woke practices. Why not?
So yeah, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Rashid just seems to be very emotionally traumatized. Again, the way we've said this in our past videos, we don't believe in Islam. I don't even like to use the word believe. We don't follow Islam because we like it, although we love it. We believe, or we follow Islam because it is the truth. It has been made apparent to us. And sometimes the truth is hard to swallow in some aspects, like war is necessary at times to defend your livelihood. If someone's attacking your family, sometimes you got to pick up a weapon and defend your family. You may be a pacifist. You may not want to do that, but at times you might have to do that. If God says that it's allowed for a man to have 4 wives, that's not something that I can really question. I can ask why that may be, and someone can give me a sustainable answer for that. But my morality, my subjective moral understanding of the world is not binding on anything. It has no binding. It's not some kind of law, whatever I think is right. whatever the current modern day society thinks is right, which by the way is a backward society involved in wars, involved in all these human rights injustices overseas, right? And then even back home, all the just degeneracy, words are losing their meaning. You can't even profess your faith anymore. You can't. The nuclear family is under attack, right? So I mean, is their moral system really superior? I don't think so. I think God's moral system is the most superior. I think what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ brought is the most superior.
And everything pretty much in Islam, it rationally makes sense if you want to dig into why stuff is happening, why God or Allah made stuff a specific way, even though it's going to be challenging to understand in our paradigm. If you think about it rationally, it completely makes sense. And for some stuff that you don't understand, we just have to trust that it makes sense because we believe God, Allah, the person who created everything, said it is good for us. So that's basically it. And yeah, like you said, with look how morality is going in the West. Like, what is the other option?
People don't even know who they are anymore.
Yeah. And if we believe it's actually from God, from Allah, why would we want to update it and change it? It makes no sense. If it's because Islam is for all times.
The thing is, if you follow a faith or a religion that has internal problems to believe in it, and then it asks you to do things that you find morally problematic, that's one thing. You can then let go of that because you're like, okay, my faith is a bunch of trash anyway. It's a lie. But we don't believe or follow those things that might be hard to grasp because we just are blindly following Islam. We understand Islam is true based off the predictions made in the Quran that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ could not have known about, such as the statements in the Quran that science is agreeing with, the sun and the moon having their own orbit, the earth and the heavens, all of space matter was in one point and Allah clothed it asunder. Allah talking about expanding the universe. Allah talking about every single living creature being comprised of water. How could an illiterate Arabian man 1,400 years ago know this information and get all of it right by coincidence? The embryology in the Quran, the fact that there's so many predictions in the Hadith as well. It's overwhelming. If you look at even the evidence for the authenticity of the Quran, first of all, we have a huge tradition in memorizing the Quran. It's the most memorized book in the world. Right? And it's been like that. From the beginning of its revelation, the Muslims would immediately memorize it. We have this in the earliest source documents about how the Muslims would treat the Quran. All you see everywhere is memorize. So-and-so's a Hafaz. He was a Hafiz. Everyone's memorizing the Quran. Right? So you have that from the beginning. You have that in the earliest traditions that were memorizing the Quran. Then we have 100% of the Quran in the first 100 years of the Prophet ﷺ's death in manuscripts, carbon-dated manuscripts. Right? If you look up Haitham Sidki on YouTube, he's a Quranic manuscript scholar, and he made a video with, I think, Paul Williams on Blogging Theology, and he will go into depth about the Quranic manuscripts that we have modern day, right? So, and if you compare this to other faiths pale in comparison to their level of authenticity and historicity. Even the figures, we don't know Moses existed or Jesus existed based off those religions alone. We know they existed based off Islam because we know Islam is the truth. And on top of that, the historical record of the Prophet's life is the most, I guess you could say, historically reliable compared to any other religious figure in history of a significant religion. I'm not talking about a religion birthed 5 years ago. But yeah, this was an interesting debate. If you guys haven't seen the full thing, I recommend you watch the entire thing.
Yeah, thanks guys for watching. Any questions you have for us, leave in the comments. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.